Me here.
So I'd like to start by congratulating you, Ritesh, from selling SIM cards at the age of 13 to becoming a millionaire at 22, and now 100,000 rooms. You are officially the largest room provider, not just in the country, but also in South Asia. So huge congratulations to you and your team.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So not many people know that Oyo actually started as a full-stack hospitality company initially until you pivoted to a marketplace model, which is what has fueled your expansion and growth. But somewhere in 2016, you decided to change gears and go back to the full-stack model and launched Oyo Townhouses. What was the thought process behind that, and what do the Oyo Townhouses represent?
Sure. Thanks, Megha. Thanks for having me here. This is a great group of people to be in front of. So thanks for having me as a part of this panel and discussions over the 2 days. It's seldom, most of us, I keep thinking that hospitality is among the hardest jobs, especially because you start early in the morning, and I can tell you almost half of you, almost all of you go through days, every alternate days, especially when you have banqueting events, when you reach back home later at night. So it's very hard to get the time of so many general managers and hoteliers in one place. So thank you for the opportunity. Going back to the background, so 2014 is when our first hotel started popping up. And the first units were quite straightforward, right? The view was getting a clean, comfortable room in low cost was a really hard thing. So I became the front office manager, and we had our first asset, and it was a full stack in the sense of it was fully operated by me with the staff that I was training. And funnily enough, for the first time, they were going through video trainings. And they're like, why do we have to go through all of this? Life was so much better without this guy around.
You even gotten tips from housekeeping, right?
Tips from housekeeping, and all the, Cornell, I don't know how many of you know, Cornell Hospitality has all their videos up online. So I used to learn, I self-learned everything from housekeeping, front office, and so on, and then would try and document some of that in Hindi for our guys in the hotel. After we did the first 30 to 40 units in Gurgaon, and it's even funny, you mentioned about the SIM card, so I must talk about how we started pricing at $9.99, and a lot of people remember Oyo as a $9.99 brand because we used to advertise very aggressively in that price point back in the day. Nowadays, you would find no reference to it for the last year and a half, and there is a reason for that. But back in the day, the reason was, a lot of people felt it was because Ginger sold at $9.99, so we were just trying to benchmark. But that was not the reason. The reason was when I was selling SIM cards, one of the biggest projects I was a part of, I don't know how many of you remember, there was a lifetime prepaid, which was also $9.99. And that was the only successful thing that I did before starting my first hotel. So I felt this was great. I mean, the only successful thing sold for $9.99, so might as well sell the first hotel rooms for $9.99. So that was the funny reason. But anyway, did that for a year. 2015 early, is when a lot of companies started emulating us, right? So there was rooms on the second half, and you could have put anything on the front, and there was a new company, so there were roughly 40, 45 of them. So that was, and almost all of them started saying that, hey, I'm going to take a floor, I'm going to take a corner of the floor, and suddenly all of them had more assets than we had, because you didn't have to do all the hard work. So for us at that point of time, sustainability and survival was significantly more important. And I look back and I feel that we should have thought about it in much more structure and long-term aspiration. But anyway, we responded with doing something similar as to what competition was doing. Did that for an entire year. In our office, there's a place where we write 95% market share or nothing, which means we genuinely believe in dominating any market that we operate in, not because of profitability. I mean, there is, of course, a profit that every company needs to earn, which we work towards. But more than profit, it's also about mission. We believe the reason why Amazon, the reason why Alibaba in their countries can continue to innovate is because they don't wake up every day saying, what is the RevPAR of the hotel next door? They're basically saying that we are dominant market leaders in whatever spaces we play in, and when we can only solve for innovation and solving for new problems. So from my perspective, that was the reason why we really went after market share. But towards 2015 end, I think the industry has been seeing us from outside in good and bad ways. So that was a time when we had significant complaints on the consistency and the likes. And as a company, we are very transparent in accepting places where we go wrong and learning from it and getting better at it. So 2016 early, we went back to our 2014-15 days, which is basically of being a full stack asset, everything from franchising, manchising, leasing, and so on, and hopefully at some point of time buying assets. And I believe that, as we speak, for the last few months, we've been a 100% full stack asset management company. And it's been hard, right? It's been 3 years of competency building, hundreds of millions of dollars of capital investment in everything from having 300 plus civil engineers, project managers, interior designers, and data scientists working together. 18 institutes where we train children who eventually come and work at our hotel. Sorry, I still call them children. These are young people who come and, millennials who come and work with us at OYO. Thousands of salespeople, roughly 1,500 people doing corporate sales and so on the ground. So it's been a significant evolution for us from being looked at as more like an aggregator of assets to eventually becoming a full stack hospitality company with, of course, significant kind of assembly lines on the back.
So like you said, the last 2 years have really seen OYO transform into a very different company. A lot of expansion, not just in the product offerings, but also geographically. You've now set up in Malaysia, Nepal, where you've got a steady foot in the door, but you've also announced your entry into China 2 weeks ago, and you already have 11,000 rooms there. So tell us, what is your expansion strategy going forward, and what are the markets that you're looking at penetrating in the next 12 to 18 months?
Sure. Let me actually start with just talking about India and how we think about this market. So as we speak, we operate in 160 cities in India, which is larger footprint than any other hotel chain in this country. And I think the context is twofold. The first one is the price points that you play in. Because OYO brand proliferates across price points today from, starting from 1,000 rupees all the way to 6,000 rupees, we can play in destinations which are exclusively for high price, for instance, in Andamans, with Port Blair and so on, where you only play like mid-scale. You don't actually play economy at all. And we can also play in markets which are just economy in nature. And the second is having a way of operating with low-cost operating model, which means that we can be profitable in a city with just 150 rooms under management, which means that if you have roughly 30 keys in an asset, just 5 assets, and you can be profitable at a city level with your general manager, your local logistics, supply chain, warehousing, all the costs included, right? So from that context, it helps us to expand in the market very broadly. It helps create a very powerful brand, because the guy in a tier 3 town, when he sees an OYO hotel on the street, he says that jab main bade shehar jaunga, I will stay in this kind of a hotel. And the third, which is most interesting, is because one of the questions I keep asking, how many cities in India need a $6 cab ride booked through a mobile app, and how many cities in India need a $25 to $30 clean, comfortable room? I think the second one sort of looks like 1,000 plus places in India if you consider leisure, pilgrim, and combine all the kind of destinations that are there. So which means inherently, if you create the supply chain of civil engineering, procurement, operating the assets, then you can open in as many cities as you like. So the only stopping point will be quality of service, and hence until you can keep the quality of service consistent, you should keep opening more assets.
That's great, but you haven't answered my question yet.
So coming to the next answer. So we launched in Malaysia 2 years back, and we did extremely well over the last 2 years. The first year were a lot of mistakes, learned from them. But last 1 year have been a great progress period in Malaysia, Nepal. And we opened China November last year. And we were in super stealth. The reason was, if somebody came and told me in India that they're opening the hotel chain in China, I would look at him and I'd be like, this guy doesn't look reasonable to me. So I felt, people would think the same about me until, even now maybe, but I think, I felt at least let's prove something before we actually go and talk about it. very happy to share that as we speak, we'd announced 11,000 room plus market across the country, operating across 28
Yeah.
cities in China. It's a remarkable market, right? The way I think about India is there are 4 million rooms, which are brownfield assets existing across the country, which needs to be converted into brand. And all of us here should see that as a big opportunity, that other than greenfield, just conversions of independents into brands is such a big opportunity.
Right.
And we see the same being in China, where there are 32 million rooms of the same kind, which are just independents operating at 25, 26% occupancy. And there needs to be a chain which can go and help convert them into a certain chain. So we see similar opportunities there. But having said that, we will continue to look at a few other countries, but the heart and soul remains between India, Southeast Asia, and China. This is a large enough market to cover and solve for.
So you mentioned 26 cities in China, and now you have 3 international countries, and of course you've got 100,000 rooms in India. How do you measure success for the firm? Is it by number of rooms, the cities you're in, valuation, or any other parameter?
Oh, that's a very deep question. So, speaking about success of our firm, we as a company are very mission driven. Our view when we started, what it is today and will potentially evolve to be in the future, is that a common Indian or any Indian who stays, or any other traveler now, given we operate in multiple countries, deserves to have a better quality of living for a lower price. It can't be more dumbed down than that, right? Provide an incrementally better product for an incrementally lower price, which means for the same customer who found getting a clean, comfortable room almost unreasonable for anything below 2 grand, provide him that for 1,000 rupees. For the same customer who thought that getting a chic experience was unheard of below 5 grand, get him for 3 grand. So for us, that is a very strong mission that drives our company. Speaking about success, our success comes in just 2 parts, which is how many small assets are we helping get more yield per square feet by beating the bigger hotel chains in the same street, which means our hotels, are they delivering 75% plus occupancy from the 26% they started before us?
Right.
And second, are we able to do it at significant scale? That's on the asset side. On the customer side, it is repeat. As we speak, 75% of our revenue comes from repeat customers and 95% from repeat plus word of mouth. So only 5% customers come to OYO by getting advertised in some place or the other. So these are 2 sides. Asset side, jump in utilization. Customer side, ensuring that more and more customers come due to word of mouth and repeat rather than marketing.
And company-wide? At a
Company-wide-
corporate level?
Sorry?
At a corporate level?
I think at a corporate level, generally speaking, we actually track just these 2 things, and at scale, of course. I think as a company, we generally don't care so much about valuations and so on, because we believe all of those are slightly more outcome oriented.
Yeah.
At a corporate level, the way to benchmark occupancy plus repeat is market share, which is if you're doing both of this, you can keep taking more market
Absolutely,
share.
yeah.
India's 4.3 million rooms. We are 100,000 under management. So we are less than 2% of the market share. So there's a long way to go.
So since I'm getting very long and dwindling answers from you, I'm going to ask you a very direct question.
Okay.
If you had to choose, which mainstream hotel brand, other than yours, would you like to head or run?
Oh, it's a hard one. It's a hard one. But, I guess, mainstream ones, by design, if I'm around in any of the hotel chains, it won't remain mainstream, probably because of perception, not because of anything else, because I think OYO is also as mainstream, but
That's
that's
why I
fine.
said other than yours. I knew you were going to say that.
So, look, I think, I would think 2 companies which I am big fans of, and I would say both out of India, because in India, I think all the hotel chains are led by incredible people. That's just me being safe.
Yes, I know.
But first would be, I think, Ace Hotels. Now, this is, again, we just talked about Citizen M. It's very similar, boutique-ish group of hotels based out of, UK and a few other countries around in Europe. Started out of Amsterdam, if I'm not wrong, very similar to Citizen M. And I think there's one more, which is called, keep forgetting. They have one in the meatpacking district in New York. I keep forgetting their name. So there are two of them. So
And what about in India?
I think India is very hard. I mean, everyone's doing a really good job. I don't think I can do a
Okay,
better
we
job
have
in any
Mr.
other hotel.
Chatwal right here in front of us. Any piece of advice for Mr. Chatwal? What would you do differently at Taj than what
Oh,
he's doing?
you know, I met him a couple of times earlier in conferences, just passing by. You know, Taj's doing a great job. I mean, I feel personally that strategy of taking a, you know, of course, claps for Taj. They've been doing a great job in what they've been doing. For us, I think specifically how they've been able to evolve over this period of time, you know, if you see history of companies and the market cap increase, you would have generally seen that after 30 to 40 years, most companies across the world, it's very hard to continue to grow. And just the energy that at least I read on newspapers with how Taj is trying to aggressively say that now we genuinely believe in ramp up of scale.
Yep.
We believe in brand proliferation. We believe in ability to get market share. Recently in the NDMC auction, you know, I don't know if it's publicly announced, but you know, one of the hotels, I think Janpat, no, one of the hotels was
Connaught.
won by the Selections brand. You know, just being aggressive around the whole asset market share, I mean, makes us feel very good about them. So congratulations. Sorry? Well, I hope someday we can partner to build half hotels into Oyo and half onto Taj. So,
Yeah, a couple would be very happy if that happens. So Ritesh, you've been adding about 10,000 rooms a month, and you take anywhere between 14 to 21 days to open a property from signing to actually welcoming your first guest. So tell me, if you can do it, why can't other hotel companies do the same? Why does it take them so long to open properties, and what would your advice to them be?
okay. Oh, this
Even
is
properties, even companies that do leases take
yeah.
longer.
No, this is a very good question, and I think very interesting perspective also, because I spend a lot of time doing this. Two broader answers. The first one is while we open 10,000 rooms a month, we're actually signing 20,000. So very few people know that actually 30 to 40% of our portfolio are actually greenfields, which means we are signing assets, which can be either, you know, okay, greenfield is a combination of land and also even cold shells, which means just slabbed assets, which we can convert eventually. So ability to be able to first lease or franchise at this scale.
Yeah.
And the second is, of course, a large ability to be able to turn around assets. I think both of this, for instance, there was a 12-floor building in BCC in Bombay, which was a big cinemas building earlier, which we converted into a townhouse in 40 days flat. The reason why we can do stuff like this, we think of it, is because of the factory mindset on the back end.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, the hotel industry tends to solve for one asset at a time. I believe instead of that, investing in a competency at scale is so much more valuable.
Right.
What does that mean? It is almost like creating conveyor belts for everything required at the asset level or a city level. So for instance, you need to have 160 SKUs of items that you need to put together to open up an asset.
Right.
So taking a 1-year view towards saying that how can I bring in so many assets, and for that, how many purchasing contracts do we need? So a lot of this is actually old school stuff, right? Getting your warehouses much ahead in advance, recruiting people 1 year in advance, having civil engineers, project managers, project management companies who will essentially do the projects on the ground because laborers don't want to be managed by your company, creating all of that a couple of years in advance. So my view is creating this 4 core competencies of OYO, which is asset management, that is signing enough assets, leasing or franchising of them. The reason we can do it is because we have an Orbis app by which we can predict the top line GOP, yield, and return ratios on the day one of going to the asset. So we can sign the asset much faster, decentralized decision making. So the leasing guy on his Orbis app sees that if this is the lease, this is the return. He shows it to the owner says yes, and they sign the contract. Ability to convert the asset, because of this large conveyor belt on the background of people who are turning around assets with the supply chain, operating competencies with our schools, and distribution competency, and that's a big one, because any asset that we open, it takes us a month. Today, townhouses run at approximately 90% occupancy and rough revpars of approximately 3,000 rupees. Now, 3,000 is not a lot,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's not bad for a one-year-old mid-scale brand in India if you compare that with other mid-scale brands that have existed for a decade or so in the country. And it is not because of our ARRs, it's because of our occupancies.
Occupancy, yeah.
Because the marginal cost of operating is so low for us. And even very small innovations, right? For example, housekeeping guys. Generally, the housekeeping boy has to go to the floor supervisor or somebody to ask, which room is going or take the sheet. Now, generally speaking, the guy who's making the list of rooms which the housekeeping guy should go and clean or the beat plan of that is not the smartest mathematical resource in the asset. If he was, then he would not be on that floor. So for us, we use the technology of having a housekeeping app where a notification comes to the housekeeping guy saying that this is the room you should go and clean, by means of which he's going to the ideal room which will save time for himself, for the hotel, and he doesn't get the incentive for cleaning the room fast enough until the customer feedback comes, which ensures that you're always triangulating. So, I think generally speaking, thinking of a longer term investment rather than a short term investment is what, in my view, keeps a lot of hotel chains behind. Because globally it's been done. China's largest hotel chains are 400,000 rooms under management.
Yeah.
There's no reason why we can't be doing this in a country where total branded ecosystem is less than 200,000 rooms. So, I genuinely believe there is an opportunity to get there. But I feel the one line that people should remember is every overnight success is at least a few years old story.
Absolutely.
So having that few years of investment will help you get that overnight success of many thousands of rooms under management.
So Ritesh, on the product side, we've seen an influx of new brands from Oyo. We have the Oyo townhouses, Oyo homes, Oyo living. It seems like you're adopting a branded house strategy over a house of brands strategy. Is that the case, and do you see that changing in the medium to short run?
Yeah, no, I think having a multi-brand strategy is something that townhouses have helped us learn. That generally speaking, we used to have a lot of nice assets and we just put the Oyo on top of them. But for the customer, it was always hard to say that I saw the other Oyo, which was at 1,500 rupees, just a normal room, and now there's this chic place. This also has the same thing. So it used to be hard for us to explain to users what we really are. So after opening Townhouse, we've seen it everything from RevPAR, cost of operating, asset owners wanting to join the chain, and so on, being very, very interesting. So you will continue to see us open many brands. We acquired a company last year called Nova Scotia that we've rebranded to making it into Silver Key, which is our service apartment offering. And we will continue to look at a multi-brand approach because we believe that at the end of the day, the platform of Oyo is what is going to remain the same, which is the asset signing mechanism will be the same. The asset turning around mechanism will be the same. The sales teams will be the same.
Right.
But for the customer, the proposition will continue to evolve with a multi-brand strategy and probably with some brands not having the Oyo name on them. From our perspective, it doesn't really matter what name shows up. It matters that whether it stands true to our mission of having a better quality of living for the guy who's coming in and staying in that place.
Okay. So I think we're just about done with time. So I'm just going to ask you two last questions. On the technology front, we're seeing AI and blockchain really change a lot of industries. How do you think hospitality players need to adapt these technologies, and what can they do to prepare themselves for the usage of these technologies?
Sure. No, I think generally technologies like AI, blockchain are used as very nice jargons, but reality is we don't know how our life's going to get better with that.
Yeah.
So I will share some of the things that we've been doing to make our lives better, a problem which a lot of us would be facing every day. The first one is a very interesting, it's like a shameless plug that was being talked about a little earlier. We realized that in every hotel of ours, we used to need to go to the SHO nearby to get authorization to collect all the ID cards at the asset. Now remember, doing it in 10 hotels or 50 hotels or 100 hotels is still okay. doing it at 5,000 assets across India is a lot of hard work. That will mean having like thousands of people just because so many registers are getting out of use, just going and getting new registers signed by SHO. So it's a lot of hard work. So what we eventually did was we created a free software for all the governments. We went to governments and we said this is a present from our side to the government for every hotel in the city. This can be gifted to everyone. All the data remains in NIC ledgers, so we don't want any of the data. But we don't want the pain of collecting the ID card, maintaining the hard copy records, going to the SHO and getting a clearance, and so on. This ensures that the customer's data is so much more safe and secure because they're not hard copies of it lying around.
Yeah.
But more importantly, our lives get so much better because just the front office hassle of managing all of this in small and distributed units is much broader. Especially if you think about our Oyo Homes brand. Oyo Homes are like the second homes that we manage in Goa, Shimla, and so on. These are individual homes. Imagine having new registers for all of them. So that's one example. The other one is a very interesting one as well. Again, managing 5,000 assets will mean 5,000 revenue managers because generally we have one revenue manager in every asset. That's a lot of money. You don't want to have so many people doing revenue management. And imagine the amount of fights you'd be dealing with heading a brand between the general manager and revenue manager of 5,000 assets. Not easy. So from our perspective, we just have 9 data scientists who run pricing of all our assets. Of course, the people on the field can give feedbacks to them, but they run pricing to the extent where we have data of which trains are landing at what point of time. What is the load factor of airlines for the month, and hence how should the pricing for those dates in those cities look like? So the extent of using, the first one is more blockchain, that is just using the ledger around yourself for keeping data in manners that we used to keep earlier in much more safer forms. And second one is an example of AI that is continuing to let them, not AI, more machine learning, that is letting the machine continue to learn about pricing history so that a human doesn't need to decide about pricing anymore. It can be decided. I mean, no more the life of having 5 hotels around and finding out which hotel got what RevPAR yesterday and then pricing yourself around it. Now you can use machines to decide that. So I feel eventually just understanding the problems we have will help us think about real-life solutions to all of these new technologies. Otherwise, they'll all remain jargons.
Wonderful. Okay, so to wrap up, I am going to name a few companies, and I would like you to describe them in one word. One word. Don't give me long answers. Okay? Taj Hotels and Resorts.
The Indian culture.
That's not one word. How did you raise funding,
Culture.
Ritesh? Marriott International.
Scale.
The Oberoi Hotels and Resorts.
Sorry?
The Oberoi Hotels and Resorts.
Or service.
Airbnb.
Innovation.
Fab Hotels.
Copying. Sorry, I mean, look, I mean, she put a gun on my head and basically said, come up with names. So I just came up with whatever came. But look, honestly, I have respect for everyone who's trying to work towards the same mission. So please don't consider it as disrespect. It's just what came to my head as the first thing. So
it's fine. You don't need to apologize. Hyatt International.
Hyatt, I think, sorry, I'll use 3 words, but I'll make it simpler. Gods of franchising. I mean, they understand franchising like nobody else. So franchising.
Okay, and finally, Oyo.
Hard to come up with one word. But again, I think if there is one word, I would say innovation again.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ritesh, for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you, everyone, for your time.